Hello, friends and residency candidates, and welcome to today's discussion where I'm going to be answering some general questions about the match application process. I know we're coming very close to the deadline, so I hope everybody is able to share any questions you might have. If you've had some experiences that you're unsure about, make sure that you leave them in the comments below. I'll be addressing any questions you might have, any that I'm able to answer, some questions specific to ERAS or document uploading, things like that, maybe better directed towards ERAS if you're having issues, or ECFMG. But otherwise, if you have questions about the ERAS application, supplemental application, personal statements, letters of recommendation, just the general process, let me know. Leave them below in the comments. I'll be looking through them throughout the chat today. But I wanted to just start out with a couple general points that I want to share. And the first thing is something that you might not have been thinking about, but you still have time to change if necessary, which is your ERAS photograph. Okay, so this is actually so important. And I actually just had a discussion with Dr. Conrad Fisher, who I'm sure a lot of you know. It's posted up on YouTube on Match Residence YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out if you haven't seen that interview already. But I just had it yesterday with him. It's up. He has a lot of input about the 2022 cycle. And of course, it's Dr. Fisher, so he's awesome to listen to regardless. And so one of the things that he emphasized, and we talk about this through the Residency Experts branch of our service, where we provide the ERAS editing and photograph review and things like that. And what we emphasize is that your ERAS photograph should be a professional headshot. And if it's not a professional headshot, then it is not going to compare well to the other photographs of the other people. And not only should it be a professional headshot, but your demeanor and your personality and your attitude should be one of warm, accommodative friendliness. And, we've seen so many ERAS photographs, and, no offense, but if you look upset or you look unhappy to be there taking that photograph, if that's what your ERAS photograph looks like, please retake it. It's one of those things where a picture speaks 1,000 words, and it's so vital that programs feel an attraction to getting to know you better. They want to say, oh wow, this person seems like excited to learn, they seem friendly, and they seem very professional. And so taking, a selfie in the car and uploading that, or your passport photo, is not going to cut it. So just make sure that you're really going for the professional headshot. If you can't get a professional, have somebody else to take the photograph. Make sure you're in very professional attire, and of course, present yourself with a somewhat neutral background and give a at least somewhat positive to neutral smile. And that's going to set you up for success for the residency application cycle. And so I wanted to talk about that. Again, if you have questions about your application or anything that you're working on right now, personal statements, definitely leave them in the comments. But something else I wanted to, never thought a picture were so important. Yeah, it's so true though, because, especially the fact that they're not going to have as many in-person interviews, but it's one of the first impressions they get of you. And it's so critical that that is something that they feel comfortable with. So, even if you're not a natural smiler, it's important to do your best and, ask yourself, how would I want to greet a new patient? And what's the energy that I want to bring to that interaction? And try to bring that type of energy to your photograph, and that's going to help you along. If you're struggling with your personal statement right now, and I know a lot of people have been delaying this, or it's just taken them weeks and months, we do have some blog articles at residencyexperts.com that discuss, 4 of the most important things to include for your personal statements. And we've discussed them before, but just to run through them again, just make sure you're talking about your interest in the specific specialty that you're applying to, the characteristics, experiences, and qualities that you have that make you a good fit for that specialty, backed by specific examples, your expectations or hopes for a residency training program, what you're looking for in a program, and then the future vision and goals you have. So maybe like a 5-year goal and then a 15-year vision, just to help programs understand, what you're looking forward to in your training. So I'm going to see if we have any questions so far. Like I said, just make sure you leave them in the comments if you have questions about the application cycle. Please, sir, I'm a repeat applicant this year. I cannot see MSPE and medical school transcript to assign to programs. Is this normal? So that's a question for ERAS that you should contact them if you have not contacted them already. I know ERAS does have some of the documents transfer from year to year, but if you're not seeing the documents that you expect to be seeing, you need to talk to ERAS and then also probably the ECFMG, because they're the ones who actually upload the documents. So definitely contact them. There's going to be a lot of document submission types of issues, and you definitely want to be bringing that up with either the ECFMG and ERAS as soon as possible, because they're the ones who are going to actually be able to help you with those. So if you're having document submission issues, definitely contact them. Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you. Amazing. So like I said, leave me any questions, and I don't know if you guys have submitted your supplemental ERAS application already, but the first due date was the 19th, and so you can still submit your supplemental application even though it's past the 19th. And if you have not submitted it, you don't need to certify your ERAS application in order to submit your supplemental. So you can still submit your supplemental between the 20th through the 30th if you're applying to internal medicine, categorical surgery, or dermatology. And if you have questions about the supplemental application, what you think you should be including or not including, ask them in the comments. I'll be happy to address them. We are editing the supplemental applications through Residency Experts still. So, we've been providing editing and feedback for dozens of supplemental applications. So what compatibility score and match resident site? So what is a good score to have? And this is a great question. And the thing is that everybody's compatibility score ranges differ. So some applicants might have, 50 programs that are all above 90s. And that means they're probably a strong candidate overall. But if your score ranges tend to be in the upper 60s to 80s, then you just have to determine what are the best scores for you. So something that we often promote people to do is, if you go to the filters at the top right and check the iLink or interview link programs. So interview link means that those programs have interviewed candidates with similar criteria to you in the past. And so you check that filter, and then you look at the compatibility scores. And for some people, that might be a list of 50 or 100 programs. For others, it might be 15 to 20, but those are likely going to be some of the best programs for you to consider. So in terms of a good compatibility score, 90 and up is typically good, but again, that's going to change from person to person. All right, 5-year goal, expectations, why specialty interest? Yep. So somebody just summarized our personal statements. Yes. Can we give, if you submit your application before the deadline on the 26th, will that application be above other applications when programs start viewing it? No. So basically, every application that's submitted before 9 a.m. Eastern on the 29th is going to have the exact same timestamp of September 29th. And from what we know, and we checked with ERAS last year about this, based on the timestamp, after that, if they're all submitted at the same time, it's ordered by last name. So it's not going to be, if you submitted on September 1st versus September 28th, there's no difference in the way that programs are going to see that in the ERAS application submission. Keep in mind the supplemental is slightly different. So there was the deadline on the 19th, which if you submitted the supplemental by then, it will be included in the 29th. If you submit the 20th through 30th, it'll be available to programs on October 6th. All right. Yes, other than step 1 and step 2, what other things should we do before early match? The OET, a must or not? So the OET is required for ECFMG certification, and ECFMG certification is either preferred or required by a certain number of programs. Many programs do not require ECFMG certification for interview consideration. But getting that certification early on is definitely helpful when they're reviewing applications, whether that's for interviews or when they're reviewing them for the rank order list. Because if you're certified early on, they don't have anything to worry about. But if you are, you're awaiting scores when it comes down to the rank order list submission, or you're not certified, it definitely can hinder their desire to want to rank you. So I definitely recommend doing those things, getting your pathway set up through the ECFMG, taking the OET, and getting all of that done as early as possible. The current season probably feels crazy right now. Everybody has a mad dash to the finish line, and it's so hard to try to get all these things done. But then after that, once you submit your application, it's kind of back, it's a waiting game. And so the things you need to be doing, taking your steps if you haven't taken them. A lot of people are going to be taking CK sometime in October, and then take your OET, get the pathway set up, get certified as soon as possible. So under publications, can I include newspaper articles? Because I don't have any publications in scientific journals. Okay, so for the publication section, let's just look at the different areas, because people have a lot of questions about this in general. And so there's a few different types of publications that you can list. The peer-reviewed journals, peer-reviewed journal and article abstracts, and book chapters, scientific monographs, other articles. So, and then poster presentations, oral presentations, and peer-reviewed online publication, etc. So you could technically probably squeeze it in under the other articles. And you just want to make sure that it's probably relevant. If you're publishing newspaper articles for something just kind of random and not related to medicine, then it's unlikely that you're going to be benefited by including that. Do program directors know if we apply to multiple specialties? So there are some ways they can tell. This would be one of those cases where if you apply to multiple specialties in the same hospital, then it is possible that they will know that you're applying to multiple specialties. So there's a question about applying to opposed residency programs, let's say like internal medicine and family medicine in the same program. And there is a possibility that, they could see you're applying to both. And it really comes down to your preferences and how many compatible programs you have to apply to. So if you need to apply to programs in the same hospital, then, it's not like something that you absolutely should not do. It's something that comes with a certain degree of risk. But other than that, it's unlikely programs are going to know you're applying to multiple specialties. There's nothing in ERAS telling them which specialties you're applying to. Of course, if you include things in your application that would lead them to believe that you're applying to multiple specialties, then in that case, they'll possibly know. All right. Is there a filter on Match Resident for Step 2 score needed? And this is a question we get fairly often. And the thing is, what we might recommend doing is using the filter for ECFMG certification rather than the Step 2 CK being required. And the reason for this is obviously that in order to get ECFMG certified, you need Step 2 CK. And so you can hide the programs that require ECFMG certification at the time of application. And so that's going to remove a lot of the programs that are more strict about, Step 1, Step 2, and pathway requirements. So although we don't have a specific filter for CK being needed at the time of application, the ECFMG filter can work in a similar capacity. Research background, or what to do if I don't have a very good research background or if it doesn't interest me? Is that a big red flag? Should I specify this in my personal statement? So that's one of those things where it's better not to point something out unnecessarily. You don't want to say, well, I love medicine, but I hate research. So it's one of those things where it's probably best just to not mention, especially in the personal statements. If you have some research experience, that's better than none. But there are people who apply and match without research or publications. So it's definitely helpful, especially if you get research experience in the specialty that you're applying for, but it's not 100% necessary. Okay, so 3 letters of recommendation, 2 home country and 1 through a telerotation. How critical is it to have a 4th one, which I don't think I'll be able to get in time? So most programs require 3 letters of recommendation. Some require 4, and that's found in Match Residence customized lists. We have a specific question for unique letter of recommendation requirements, and if the programs tell us they require 3 LORs, 4 LORs, 1 LOR has to be from a US physician, things like that. So applying with 3 LORs, generally speaking, is still a safe bet. The 4th is basically optional for a lot of people, or a lot of programs, I should say. And if they, like to see 4, but you only have 3, then they still might consider your application, especially if you have other strong areas or aspects of your application that are appealing to them. Okay, so a specific question, I am a little confused as my tab for step 2 score is blank. And this is specific to your Match Resident customized list, I'm assuming. And if you've gotten your step 2 CK score and that's blank, you can actually just fill it in. And so you just go to your account settings and fill in that score. And if you have other issues with your profile, definitely reach out to us through support@matchresident.com. All right. Applying for prelim and categorical in the same program affect you in some way? Well, it is reasonable to apply to prelim and categorical depending on your goals. And if you're a weaker applicant, then applying to the prelim and the categorical would probably make some sense just to maximize your chances. For stronger applicants that all you want to do is categorical internal medicine, then there's not a really great reason to apply to the prelim and categorical, because at the end of the day, if you are a good candidate, you don't want to match into the prelim. You want to get the categorical spot. So you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons. There's no, again, hard line or severe issue with doing that, but you have to consider what that might mean to the program and how they're going to perceive that and what your interests and goals are by applying. Does a research experience without any publications count? Absolutely. So any research projects you're working on, even if there was not a publication as an end result, should still be in your ERAS work, research, and volunteer experiences. And the reason for that is because it's a meaningful CV experience that you should include in your application so that programs can see that you're more well-rounded, that you have a diversity of experiences. And it's okay if it didn't end up in a publication. It's still going to be increasing your overall credibility and diversity as an applicant. Okay, the newspaper article is about social justice and human rights. And this is from a question earlier about whether or not to include that in the ERAS application. And it is, I believe, relevant enough because a large aspect of medicine has to do with social justice and human rights. And I actually have a certificate in international human rights, a background in public health. So I definitely resonate with those topics. And I believe that a lot of programs also appreciate the fact that some applicants are more interested into the ethical side of things in terms of standardization and making sure that patients' rights and the advocacy is there. So I don't think that it would hurt you, and it could help you to include those articles under the other articles section. Hello everybody. Is a slow part of those 3? Yes, so the slow does count as one of your letters of recommendation. Some programs want to see 2 slows and 1 regular LOR, or 1 slow and 2 or 3 other letters of recommendation, but it does count as an LOR. Okay, what if I don't have research experience nor practical skills? Is that bad? Well, it depends what you mean by practical skills. If you're trying to be a physician, you need some sort of medical skills to be able to perform your duties adequately. So that's something that you'd have to really consider whether or not you are going to be a good candidate for residency, depending on what you mean by practical skills. How many LORs should be from US physicians? Ideally, you would want about one letter of recommendation at minimum. The more LORs from US physicians that have worked with you in a direct clinical capacity, the better. If you don't have any, it's okay. You just need to make sure you're not applying to programs that require US clinical experience and expect to see LORs from US physicians. So the more you have and the stronger those US letters are from hands-on clinical experiences, the better off you're going to be. Does pass-fail going to affect IMGs? It's going to have an effect on the application process. And this is something I briefly discussed with Dr. Fisher in our interview yesterday, which is up on YouTube. So check that out. But basically, pass-fail is going to have a lot of implications. One of the biggest being that the only numerical metric, of course, that programs are going to have is now Step 2 CK. So the logical conclusion is that there's going to be a higher emphasis on Step 2 CK scores. And, that's an inevitable consequence of having only one basically standardized metric that you can evaluate 3,000 candidates by with one measure. So it is going to affect IMGs. Obviously, taking the CK and doing well on it is going to be even more important. But, the entire application arena is slowly evolving. We see this with the supplemental application. But, things that you can do when Step 1 goes to pass-fail are focus more on getting US clinical experience and US rotations. Have other areas of your application that are stronger, your CV, your work, research, and volunteer experiences. Make sure that you're participating in extracurricular activities. Make sure that you're getting some research done if you can. And of course, you're getting relevant experiences in the specialty you're applying for. Do you think programs will review applicants who have specified that geographic region first? So the thing with the supplemental application is that it's going to be different for every program. Some programs might use the supplemental application as a preliminary filter, or they might use their normal convenience metrics, basically step scores, cutoff time since graduation, and then they might look at, okay, which of these people, we cut it from 1,200 down to 500. Now they might say, all right, now let's look for the people who actually signaled us. And then they might have, a couple dozen, a handful of people that signaled them. And the geographic preferencing is probably not going to be the number one thing on their list, in all honesty. They're going to incorporate that into their overall assessment. But, it's one of those things that we're just going to have to find out more as the season and the year progresses, and we're able to get more feedback from program directors and review committees and really learning how their experience of the application was, what their process was. And so, we're very excited to learn more about the program's experience of the supplemental application. Division preference. Okay, pick 3 regions. Will there be a bias? I mean, again, it's one of those things, basically what I was just saying, we're going to have to see how programs react to it. And it's important to keep in mind that there's a lot of unknowns right now, and it's okay to be unsure. And it's important, though, to just do your best and to, be honest with your preferencing and signaling. So school submitted my medical school transcript with a rotation being incomplete. Will this hurt me if it doesn't get fixed in time? So it is not going to be the biggest red flag, because it's one of those things where if you're still in medical school, they're probably expecting that you're going to graduate and complete all the requirements in time to start residency. And if you're not, you shouldn't be applying. So although there might be some concern and it might come up in an interview, for example, it's not necessarily going to just sink your residency chances. Will the ACLS and BLS will benefit me since my school doesn't provide it, so I have to pay for it? It's one of those things that is somewhat beneficial. Again, it's probably not going to sink your application if you don't have those. Is 2 months of USCE in a community hospital which has residency enough for most, if not all, programs? So 2 months of US clinical experience is a good amount of experience. Some programs have a minimum of 3 months, 6 months, a year. It's all going to change and depend on the program. That's one of those things that's specified in customized residency lists. So definitely look for that information in terms of US clinical experience. One of the most important things is that you get strong letter of recommendation from that US clinical experience. How mentor LORs weigh in comparison to ones you've rotated with. If somebody has not worked with you in a direct clinical capacity or research capacity, for example, it's not a very strong letter of recommendation. If somebody is literally just your mentor or advisor, then having a letter of recommendation from them is not necessarily the best thing, because letters of recommendation are supposed to support your clinical capacity. How does this person perform in a clinical setting? And if the mentor can't demonstrate that through direct contact with working with you, then the letter of recommendation is not that strong. All right, will it affect if I leave the other experiences in supplemental ERAS blank? Not everybody is expected to fill out that question, so it's okay if you do not answer that. If you don't feel like you have, a significant life obstacles, which not everybody necessarily is expected to have, financial hardship, familial issues, educational barriers, things like that, it's okay to leave that section blank. It's better to leave it blank than input some meaningless filler content. Okay, step 1, 237, step 2, 245, 2 months of US clinical experience, 3 US LORs, 1 slow. What are the chances of matching into a university program? Moderate. Those scores are going to be considered by programs. You might not get the majority of university program interviews, but it's definitely something that you should apply for if that's what you're interested in, especially the fact that you have 3 US letters of recommendation and your step 2 showed a significant or moderate improvement from step 1, and in that case I would recommend applying to the programs that you're interested in. All right, let's see. Does having a high step score, step 2 CK, mean I might be shunned from a lot of community programs? It's not something that they would hold against you in all likelihood. It's better to have higher scores, and if you're interested in community programs, I'm sure you could get interviews if you have high scores. All right, what platform is more beneficial for USMLE prep? That's something we'll have to get the input from maybe some of our ambassadors that have had experience with some of those sources. We definitely have some videos on YouTube from some of our ambassadors, and we'll be posting more talking about USMLE prep and best resources, so definitely stay tuned for those. India, I'm from India. In my intern year, I want to pursue neurosurgery. What are my odds? Well, the most important thing is that you get US clinical experience and you get extremely high scores on your USMLEs. And if you do those things, then you're most likely going to increase your chances. It's definitely going to be a longer shot, but you need to do everything in your power to get familiarization with the US medical system and get great USMLE scores if you haven't done so already. Do home country LORs make a difference? So yes, having LORs from your home country is very standard for IMGs, and it's totally okay to include. Having the US letter recommendation, if possible, is definitely helpful. But if all you can get is strong letters of recommendation from your home country, then that's totally okay. All right, what's next? How to look for remote research experience to do from home country. We can post a video about that. Some of our ambassadors, again, have talked about finding research. There's actually another live, and so I'd recommend watching that. We'll try to link it in the comments, and that's going to provide some more insight into how to find those research opportunities. Do you have any tips for confidence in interviews for non-native English speakers? Absolutely. And it comes down to one thing, and it's practice, 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 practice. And the best way to do that is through using interview prep tools. Match Resident does have interview prep services available through your dashboard for registered members. And especially since the vast majority of interviews are going to be online again this year, then practicing in a virtual setting is also all the more helpful. So the way the interview prep service works through Match Resident is basically there are about 24 to 26 video lessons along with accompanying written lessons. And then there are specialty specific question banks that are going to help you with figuring out what are the common questions, what are the specialty specific questions. And then the way it works is you actually record your practice answers to these various questions, and you get automatic AI score-based feedback, which is going to help you assess how well you're performing. So for example, your background, your eye contact, whether or not you have filler words, and making sure that you're basically covering all the basics for answering the question. Then you can actually send that video that you recorded to mentors to provide their specific input for you and to also additionally assess your performance. And for premium members, there's weekly group interview prep sessions, and you can actually send some of your practice answers to our residency interview coaching expert. So again, if you're not confident in English and you're getting ready for interviews, you absolutely have to practice. I mean, everybody should practice regardless of whether or not you are a native English speaker, but especially if it's not your first language or you're not extremely comfortable with it. All right. Does a LOR from university in comparison to private practice make any difference? So it comes down to the strength of the letter of recommendation. A private practice can actually have some benefits versus a university, especially if you were working in a smaller setting. You're going to have more direct hands-on clinical experience potentially, and the person who is actually writing the letter of recommendation is somewhat more likely to have had lots of direct contact with you throughout that experience. So it can be helpful to have an LOR from either. You really just have to go with where your clinical experience is from and getting specialty specific letters of recommendation. And just another reminder, make sure that you're not applying to certain specialties with letters of recommendation recommending you for a different specialty. So having two versions of letters of recommendation can definitely be helpful. So that one is a specialty specific LOR, and then the other one might be a general letter of recommendation, or actually acknowledging your interest in the other specialty, even though it's from a different one. All right. How to get lots of doctors from the US. How to get LORs from doctors from the US for an IMG. Well, you'd have to do rotations in the United States or potentially do virtual rotations from overseas, and you can still get that US clinical experience to some degree. And so telerotations are something that are discussed in the customized list as well, so that you're able to see which programs consider telerotations as hands-on US clinical experience. And it's important to keep in mind that you just have to do what it takes. And that might mean coming to the US and doing a month rotation, or if you can't do that, getting the virtual experience if possible. And even if you can't get a strong letter of recommendation from it, having that US exposure on your CV can be helpful. All right. Will graduating year more than 2 years affect my matching as an IMG? The longer you're out, the stronger effect that has on your candidacy. And 2 years is not extremely long. Most programs cutoffs tend to be around 3 to 5, 7, or 10 years. Some programs certainly only look for recent graduates. So you need to look at which programs you qualify for based on your year of graduation. And if you are able to keep clinically relevant during that time, that's also going to greatly assist your application efforts. And if you guys are just joining, welcome. I have been answering some general questions for everybody as we come up to the last week. Keep in mind that applications, of course, go out on September 29th, but don't wait until 12 midnight on the 28th to keep, uploading your application and supporting documents. It's definitely recommended to get that done at least a day in advance so that you are able to take your time. You're not assigning documents to the wrong specialties, and that you are applying to the right programs, and it has enough time to actually process within the ERAS system. So give yourself that time, try to get everything done a little bit early, and you're going to be much better off than waiting until the very last minutes. All right, so we have, should failed an attempt be addressed on the PS even if other exam scores were stellar? That's a very good question. If you have one attempt and your scores are very high other than that one attempt, it's something that may or may not be included, and you're going to hear different things from everybody. And that's why I say it's optional to some degree. Because if you have an attempt and low scores or multiple attempts, then it's more likely that you're going to be wanting to explain that in your personal statement to some degree. But if you had the one attempt, maybe it was your first attempt at step one, but then you crushed step one, then you got an amazing score for step two, programs are less likely to care so much about that attempt. So if you do mention it, it might be worth a couple lines in your personal statement. I'd say 2 to 3 sentences maximum. But other than that, it's not something you want to dwell on too much. Okay, will residency from different departments will affect while matching an internal medicine residency? It's one of those things where you have to apply with who you are and what you have. So doing a residency in a different specialty in another country and then pursuing something like internal medicine in the US is not all that uncommon. And so again, you just need to make sure that you're having the specialty specific letters of recommendation and ideally US clinical experience in internal medicine to help bolster your evidence for your interest and qualifications for that specialty. All right. How can I find legit rotations from the US? I'm all the way in Europe and have been trying to find a way. Can you please explain? What I would recommend doing is looking for reviews of those rotations that are available. There are a lot of services that offer paid rotations where you're paying them to get the rotation. And unfortunately, we don't have a specific organization that we work with or could recommend. So I'd say the best thing to do is to read the reviews of the different programs that are out there and go with those that have established some credibility. The rotations might not all be glamorous and glorious, but at least going to credible places that have produced strong letters of recommendation for those rotations is a good place to start. All right. Will CS be reported? Also, can we apply from programs and assign documents as they upload? So yes, you can apply to programs and then assign documents later. It's best to get your document assignments in as early as possible, especially before the 29th if you can. Don't apply to programs if you're missing like multiple documents. Like if you only have one letter of recommendation and no personal statements, then don't apply on the 29th. Apply with an almost complete application. Some program directors are going to review your application even if you just have 2 letters of recommendation, but just try to make sure you get that third one in within about a week from the 29th if possible. And in terms of CS, so anybody who has taken the CS, the scores will be reported on your transcript. So if you have attempts on the CS, that's a permanent part of your USMLE transcript. All right, if my LOR mentions IM, can I still send to family medicine? It can mention the fact that you might have been doing an internal medicine rotation, but it should not say, I strongly advocate for Dr. Jones as an internal medicine resident if you're applying with that LOR for family medicine. So make sure that it's not recommending you for the other specialty. It can mention the fact that it was a IM specific rotation, but make sure it doesn't recommend you for the other specialty. All right, so we have another question about compatibility scores. So I did talk about that a little bit earlier, but the compatibility score is a metric which measures how much you meet and exceed the minimum requirements for the residency program. And the higher your criteria is compared to the minimum requirements and things like IMG friendliness, interview link, metrics, then the higher that score is going to be. Another question about CS. Does 5 years of internship completion tag a red flag and you are out of the competition? Well, 5 years of internship, I would have to ask in what context that was completed and what your status is from that completed experience. And if it was perhaps done in the US and you had to leave programs, or if you completed training overseas and it was a successful completion, then that's a different story. All right, I attended some virtual open houses and residency recruitment fairs virtually. Is it okay to reach out to them, restating my interest in the program and hope to be considered for an interview? So sending a letter of interest to programs, or an email of interest rather, is definitely okay. You just want to make sure that it's never generic. Address it to the person that you are actually emailing, which would most likely be the program coordinator. You could potentially CC the program director. Some program directors read emails like that and some don't. So it's kind of a gamble, but program coordinator is more likely to open your email and read it. And just make sure that it's highly geared towards the specialty that you're actually, the program that you're applying for. Talk specifically about the program and why you're interested in that exact program. And it should not be generic. It should not be a copy paste for 20 different programs with just changing the name of the program. It really needs to be focused on them, or else it's going to have a worse effect than a better effect. Okay, CS failures. Again, every USMLE that you have taken will be on your USMLE transcript, including CS failures. And if you do have failures on the CS, it will potentially affect your candidacy. Will they still use that as criteria to filter? That's a great question, and it's something that programs may look for. If you have multiple attempts on the CS, they may use that as a filter. Whether or not they're going to use it as a filter regardless, we're not entirely sure. That's why we have in the customized list an optional filter that says to hide programs that have historically required passing CS on the first attempt. So that's something that you can choose to use in your customized list to help narrow the number of programs available. All right, so we've gotten through a lot of questions here. I'll take a few more before we wrap it up. Of course, reach out to us through support@matchresident.com. If you still need help editing your ERAS application, go to residencyexperts.com. That's where we're providing ERAS editing, optimization, and review. And our turnarounds are just about 1 to 2 or 3 business days for the ERAS application plus personal statement editing. Check that out. All right, if I get my Step 2 CK score on the 29th, do I just resend the USMLE transcript that very day, and will the score be there? So yes, resend your transcript or reauthorize it as soon as possible. Again, with ERAS, things sometimes take time, so I can't say exactly when it's going to become available. But the sooner you do it, the better. by the time a program even reads your application, they may see the updated content there. All right, thank you everybody who has been here. If you have any final questions, please do leave them in the comments below. Give people just a couple more minutes to ask any dire questions. I know we're in the final straits here. So if you haven't already, make sure that you're completing your personal statements, you're working on your ERAS application, get your letters of recommendation uploaded early. Those do take time, especially through the ECFMG. And if you do have other concerns or questions, yeah, definitely reach out to us. Looks like that might be all the questions for now. If we missed any, send us a DM, or we'll try to respond to any questions that come to us through Instagram, as well as, of course, emailing us, support@masterresident.com. And many thanks to everybody out there. It's been a pleasure. I hope I has been able to address some of your worries and concerns. I know it's extremely stressful. Try to take some time for yourself. Time is limited, but it's important to take care of yourself. So try to do that. And until next time, bye for now, everybody.